Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. If you're here as a first-time listener, welcome. Glad to have you in the conversation. Glad to have you along for the ride. If you are an existing and returning listener, I just have one thing to say to you today. Thank you, because we recently found out that the podcast has cracked the top 10 fastest growing podcasts in the world, and all thanks to you. And that's exciting about that is there's over 1 million podcasts in the iTunes stores. So, wow, what an accomplishment. Couldn't have done it without you. Okay, a couple of house cleaning things real quick. Always subscribe, no matter where you're listening. We're on over 23 different applications where you can get your podcasts. And of course, you can always go to my website, rexandrewshow.com/podcast, but you can find that. And you can listen there live or listen in podcasts. All right. Well, today I've got an exciting guest to introduce you to and a fun conversation. You know, life is just, we are all a story. Now, some people are more interesting stories, and I think I have an interesting story today, but this one's a good one because she does something that's very unique. All right. She's a doctor, all right, an author, a blogger, all kinds of things, and you'll be impressed by what she does. So I'd like to welcome to the show, Traci Kimball. Traci, how are you today?
I'm great, Rex. Thanks for having me.
Well, I think you have an interesting trade that you do because you have a specialty that I'm going to guess most people haven't bumped into. So we'll talk about that, right?
That's right.
Okay. All right. So let's take the backstory because we are a cumulative total of who we are today is based on our experiences. So let's go back to the beginning of Traci and let's help our listeners understand your story. So where'd you grow up? What was your family like? Schooling, we'll just go there. So take it away, Traci. Give us Traci.
So it all started in 1977 in New Orleans. I was born to parents, Linda and Frank. And I was actually an only child. I grew up in New Orleans East, which my family don't live in anymore. They've all moved to the North Shore of the city in Slidell. But I actually lived in New Orleans until I was like 9. And then we relocated to Texas.
Okay.
I actually lived in Houston for a few years. I was a swimmer, so it was huge in Texas. So
okay.
I did swimming at a young age and actually ended up becoming and placing in the state championships. My stroke was backstroke. And,
oh, wow. Guess I never knew that. I've known you for a long time. Guess I never knew that.
Yeah.
Well, I just have one question to stop you right there because I've done a lot of traveling in business in Texas. And so how in the world did you deal with the humidity down there?
Well, I stayed in the water.
So you were always in water, whether you were in the water or out. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm actually not a straight brunette by choice. I had major curls when I was a kid with an Italian Irish heritage. And but I mean, Houston was great. We lived in the suburbs up in the northeast corner.
Okay.
And so we were there a couple years.
Sort of in the like Woodlands area type that, or
a little bit farther west. We were in the Tomball, Humble, Side Creek area. Actually.
Okay, cool.
So,
sorry, our friends in Texas will love that reference. So anyway, go ahead.
Well, my mom remarried, and my stepdad and her are both medical administrators. So we moved for business, and my stepdad got a great job actually across the state in El Paso.
Okay.
So we ended up going there. He opened a ophthalmologist practice as his practice manager and president. And so I ended up spending my youth in El Paso, stayed there for almost 11 years, graduated from high school there. And while I was in high school, I actually started cheerleading at 4 years old in New Orleans for Little League football. But I actually, officially became a cheerleader in my middle school years, and that was pretty much the activity that carried me throughout high school, middle school, and high school. I I love sports. And my best friend was the base of our cheerleading pyramid. I was the flyer. We actually were really the face of cheerleading in the city of El Paso. We
Oh, cool.
were city champions pretty much throughout my entire high school tenure. And our team went to nationals during my junior varsity or my varsity year. Both my varsity years, I was a junior when I joined varsity cheer, and so we went to nationals both of those years. And actually, in our second year at nationals, we ended up placing 8th in the state.
Wow, that's great.
And cheerleading, just like swimming, is huge in Texas.
Oh yeah.
And matter of fact, my one of the biggest elite cheer companies in the country or the world, actually, Cheer Athletics, just moved to Denver, and they opened up in Highlands. And my daughter Alexa, who's 11, about to be 12, has just joined the gym, and so she decided she wanted to follow in the footsteps of her mom and become a cheerleader. I actually didn't perpetuate that. I actually tried out for college cheer, didn't make it. And I always say it was probably the best thing, because I don't know how my life would have ended up panning out had I done cheerleading. I probably would have just become a professional cheer instructor, which I did do for a little while between high school and college. But ultimately, when I graduated high school and ended up getting accepted to University of Texas in Austin, that's where I went to school. I tried out for cheer, didn't make it. I was actually a little disadvantaged because I had always been an all-girl squad, and college cheer is partner stunts and mixed gender. So I wasn't quite used to any of that, and I really wasn't that great of a gymnast, and you really needed to have that skill set. So I bowed out. I graciously bowed out. I still represented, though. I became an orange jacket at University of Texas, which was a spirit squad and the hostess of the university. And so I ended up kind of pivoting in a way, but staying very immersed in extracurricularly in college.
Right.
Of course, joined the College of Natural Science and wanted to be a biologist. I mean, from the very beginnings, I needed to have my hands on either some kind of mammal, whether it was marine biology or veterinarian science.
Something in that vein.
So what
did you end up getting your degree in at the University of Texas?
So actually ended up getting my degree in Bachelor of Science in Zoology.
Okay.
So the zoology courses were very much geared into the human nature, human way. All of the advanced courses that I took, I mean, I started out as bio and then I transitioned to zoo. And then as I graduated and did the more advanced graduate or senior level courses, I went ahead and started taking all my prerequisites and things that would propel me into the medical space, because that's where I was headed. And because I knew even in high school that I was going to be a doctor. I had some family influences, an uncle and my first cousin, who was like a big sis to me. They were both doctors. So my mom, had a big influence on my life. And I remember this distinctively having this conversation when trying to decide to become a doctor. I was definitely thinking about being a veterinarian. And she's like, why take care of pets when all these pets need human owners? So take care of the owners. So so that's why I ended up doing that.
So where did you go to medical school then?
So I actually ended up in San Antonio, so not too far, south of Austin. Yeah. I ended up having a gap year between college and med school. I stayed in Austin, and I worked for the student health center on campus. So I was a medical assistant. And then I also helped out in the registration and billing office, because again, that's what my parents did. They were medical administrators. So I to this day, as we get along the path, it'll kind of make sense why I'm still interested in the business side of medicine. But I went to school in San Antonio in 2000. I started there, and it was a 4-year program. So then I graduated in 2004, and I got accepted to University of Colorado, and that's how I ended up in Denver, because that's
Okay.
when you graduate from medical school, you choose a specialty.
Yes.
And I chose general surgery to become a general surgeon. So applied and got accepted to the program out here in Denver at University of Colorado. And that ended up being a extended 7-year program for me. Usually general surgery is 5. But I took 2 years to do some intramural research, clinical outcomes research with the the Division of Vascular Surgery, because I thought I would eventually be a vascular surgeon. So, and then that's when I ended up having my kids. And I got married along the way there in 2003. So the family moved out to Denver, and kids arrived in 2007. And it was my son, Spencer. And then shortly thereafter, 18 months later, my daughter Alexa arrived. And then after she was only 4 months old, I went back into my clinicals, and was a chief resident then. And actually my 4th clinical year, even though it was year number 5. And so ended up applying in the end of that first chief year, my 4th year, or 5th year, for vascular surgery fellowship, and got accepted to go to Utah. So when I graduated in 2011, the family once again moved to University of Utah in Salt Lake City to start a 2-year vascular fellowship.
Wow.
And that's when the fun really starts.
Yeah, after all that education. So adding that all together, you had 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, 7 years at the University of Colorado. So that gets us to 11. Then how many years at University of Utah?
So it ended up being just one.
This one.
I ended up stepping away from the fellowship after the first year, and which is when I got introduced to what my specialty is currently, which is wound management, wound care.
Fantastic.
And
so you took a 12-year odyssey to get to your specialty that you do here today.
That's correct.
Oh, wow. Traci, that is amazing. I mean, first of all, I've got a daughter in medical school right now. She's at Tufts in Boston. And so I certainly understand the effort that it takes. But vascular surgery is a very unique specialty, but then to morph into the wound care, I mean, was there a pivotal point that took you there?
Well, there really is. I mean, it dovetails quite nicely because it's really glorified cell culture, what we do.
Okay.
I don't mean to dumb it down, but we're basically removing barriers of healing. A colleague of mine, Dr. Ravi, he would say, we're removing barriers of healing, but what we're also doing is by doing that is we're encouraging the body to heal itself. And you have to create tissue to heal. So, and the only way to do that is you have to have what I say, the 2x4s and nails, and you have to have the glue to put it all together. And the building block of life is sugar and oxygen and water.
Okay. Well, and so thank you for dumbing it down, because you're talking to me. So I know that there's a lot of people that listen to the show that understand what you're talking about, but that's fantastic. So let's talk about those 3 components. You've got sugar, water, and what was the other one?
Oxygen, the most important one.
Most important. Okay.
The most important element of life is oxygen, because water has oxygen in it. So if oxygen isn't there, then you can just hang it up. You're not going to have healing. And so vascular surgery, that's what we do. We're the plumbers to bring oxygen to the tissues.
Okay.
And so understanding vascular medicine, understanding the physiology of the blood vessel was very critical and crucial to adapting into and morphing into a wound care specialist. It's very important in day-to-day life and primary care and medicine that, folks take in oxygen and exhale out carbon dioxide. And so you put it all together. I work in a very multi-dimensional, multidisciplinary field because I need vascular surgeons. I need cardiac surgeons to help with the heart and lungs to get that oxygen into the bloodstream. I need infectious disease doctors to help deal with infection, because bacteria then, colonize wounds and then infect the body when the body can't fight off the infection. And so it furthers and perpetuates a wound and makes it a chronic wound. And so it's funny because I feel like, and I explain this to my patients, that I'm a conductor of a glorious orchestra, or I'm a cultivator of an amazing type of garden, fertilizing it, planting different things into the garden that's symbiotic to then grow and generate this bountiful, fruit, which is the tissue that we're trying to grow and replace the tissue that's been damaged or injured and is no longer viable, meaning alive. Or that dies. So it's an amazing dance. I have to say it found me. I love science from a very young age, and the nuances of chemistry and physiology, even electrochemistry comes into play with wound care. And lots of different amazing types of dressings that can generate voltage across the wound bed and actually induce the cells to migrate and replicate. And I danced with it a little bit in medical school. I was a part of the division of orthopedics, and I studied osteoblasts, which are the bone making cell. So I actually learned to do cell culture as a medical student. And so all of those experiences really then dovetailed into what I'm doing today.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there, and we're going to come back, but I just want to understand the journey a little bit. So you spent some time in Salt Lake. How'd you get back to Denver?
So I was hired on by a management company that was building a region of wound care specialists in nursing homes.
Oh, okay.
And so it's no longer in business. They actually merged with the largest management company in the country called Helogix.
Okay.
But I helped them open the Denver market, and so I started my first real job after leaving training was working in nursing homes and getting to know our geriatric population really well, and managing wounds and filling in the holes in the gaps with patients in the nursing homes, because it's it's a quality measure of good care, what your incidence and prevalence of chronic wounds are in your facility. So it was definitely a win-win situation for both patients, facility, and of course myself, in terms of the rewards that I got of keeping patients intact, keeping them alive, and healed. And then also doing a lot of education with nursing staff and administration about prevention measures to prevent these wounds, to improve the quality of care that they're getting in their facility.
Cool. So you've had a little bit of vagabond in you with being born in New Orleans, heading off to going to El Paso, heading off to college in Austin, heading off to school in El Paso, coming back to Boulder, heading over to Salt Lake. So now Colorado where's home?
Well, home is still, in my feeling, home is where your heart is, and my heart is actually in multiple places. So while my geographical home here is in Colorado, and my kids were born here, and this is where I've laid down my own roots, my personal roots in my feet, my family home is back in the South. I mean, I say all the time, New Orleans is my heart. I miss her dearly. I'm hoping to visit her again in the near future. All my family, like I said, I was an only child, but my cousins are my siblings. I grew up spending time in the country of Louisiana with my distant cousins. So that's where I go for family reunions. I go back to Louisiana.
All right.
My mom has since moved to Pensacola, and so now we have this wonderful beach home to visit and get away from the colder weather here in Colorado.
Oh, that's great. So I want to unpack a little bit about being a wound specialist as a surgeon, as a vascular surgeon. Okay. When you're dealing with wounds, are most of the wounds you deal with, are they trauma? Are they surgery related? Is there a higher percentage? Now, when I'm talking trauma, say maybe a severe burns or some sort of injury that is a opening up the skin wide, so maybe, motorcycle crash and you turn into street pizza and rip off all your skin. What does your portfolio look like for your clients?
It's very diverse. I mean, I'm a little limited now to the certain etiologies because of the age population that I deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are 55 and older. They're not riding motorcycles or even having babies. And they're certainly not pediatrics, but
right.
but truly, you nailed it. I'm a dermatopathotraumatologist.
Oh my goodness. What? Dr. Traci, you got to put that in English. What does that mean? I'm not even going to try to parrot that back to you. What does that mean?
So I manage the traumatic injuries of the skin and understand the pathophysiology of these entities, and then use that information to then reverse the pathology that they cause. But yes, most wounds are in some way, shape, or form because of trauma, whether it be from blunt injury, from sharp injury, from friction mechanical injury,
right,
from thermal injury. So these are all they're all very much traumatic. But we don't just say they're traumatic. We say that because not all of them, I mean, when it happens at time zero, it's an acute wound.
Okay.
But our patients come with many, many different types of comorbidities, other disease processes that influence the ability for the body to heal itself.
Right.
Or become a barrier of that healing.
Boy,
so
just a second. I'll interrupt you for a second there. That's a word most people have never heard until the pandemic. Oh my goodness. Comorbidities. Jeez, I can't even talk today.
It's
and this is what I do. So yeah, that's what people now, all of us have some sort of perspective on that. So sorry for the interruption.
No, and I'm glad you point that out, because it is a little bit, before COVID, that would have been a very big word, but people understand that if you want to even just kind of make it a simile or a metaphor to COVID, because of all these comorbidities, the COVID disease manifests itself in so many different ways. We call it heterogeneous phenotype, in so many different ways because of those underlying comorbidities. And so it's the same with a wound. We get infected with a wound, trauma to the skin, and because of these comorbidities, that wound then becomes a chronic wound because of a vein disease, venous ulcer is what we call it, or because of diabetes, and we call it diabetic ulcer, or because of lupus, and we call it a inflammatory ulcer or an atypical wound, or because of some type of alteration of the body's physiology because of that disease, that will then give it its name, name it, and give it naming. It has the right to the name or the etiology. And the reason why we need to put a name to the wound is because that is how it's coded in our medical coding language, and that's how insurance companies reimburse for the care based on these codes. So as a wound specialist, 85% of my job is really understanding the underlying etiology of the wound itself. Because once you figure that out, then what goes into reversing those things, or removing that barrier. And then we don't have all the answers. Sometimes wounds are terminal. Sometimes they are markers of somebody's end of life.
Yeah.
Those wounds are generally created by some external force, a pressure point, and the skin can no longer manage that pressure, and those skin cells begin to die. Or they're dying internally because they're losing oxygen, and oxygen is no longer delivered to the skin, which is our end organ. It's our largest organ and our end organ.
I was about to break in with that. A lot of people don't realize that your skin is an organ. I actually was a little bit of pre-med, being a biology major back in school, but I decided that football and girls were a lot more fun to pursue. So, yeah, it is your largest organ, and you get in trouble with that, and boy, people just don't realize that.
Yeah, or inflammatory wounds where the body itself is attacking itself. And so we have things like pemphigoid and EB, epidermolysis bullosum, which is where you get blisters and the outer layers of your skin disconnect from the underlying layers, which are the nurturing layers, and then open, very superficial wounds occur, but they're all over the body and lots of surface area, and similar to, say, a total body burn. And when people have that, they lose enormous amounts of fluid through atmosphere exchange, and become very dehydrated, and of course are exposed to more infections, because again, the skin is our protective Kevlar.
Sure.
And so we deal with all those types of wounds. In terms of bandwidth, I don't see, as patients get older, they have their ability to heal is decreased because of aging. Yep. And cell replication isn't as readily available because of the processes that take place. The triggers aren't triggered like they're supposed to be. The dots aren't getting connected like they're supposed to be. Cells aren't alive or are asleep. We call them senescent. They're in dormant stages, and they're not able to get activated through the same kind of mechanisms that, say, a pediatric patient would have. And so they don't have the stem cells in their bone marrow as a reserve like a pediatric patient. So, while we do see pediatric patients in the world that outside the world that I function in, I just don't take care of those patients as much. So I ended up finding this little enclave of a bubble to practice in that's highly fruitful and extremely valuable and rewarding, for sure, because of the need that older aging skin requires to be intact and stay intact.
So let's explore this a little bit, because I know doctors take different specialties based on some of the rewards and the interesting levels of it. Tell me about the rewards that you get being a doctor, being a wound specialist.
Well, the one thing is I get to see my patients almost every week.
Nice.
I know. And of course, we get to really dive deep into each other's lives. They become, family, and they're a wound. I look at a wound as almost as similar as a major cancer. These things can live with the patient for many, 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 many years. I think the oldest wound I ever managed was 25 years old.
Wow. So that angle of it, getting immersed in each other's lives, I'm sure that's probably very difficult for you since you're such an introvert.
Right? It just is a perfect marriage of career and personality, to be honest, because I am not an introvert.
I know that. You're one of the interviews that I have to like look for just a bit of breath there so I could ask you a question. So that's great.
But you know what the really the reward is that not only am I a clinician or a physiologist or an infectious disease doc or a traumatologist or whatever, I'm also a mental health specialist too.
Oh yeah.
Because it's quite intriguing. A lot of times when you end up taking a patient and you interviewing them and you're trying to understand why, you know, they don't have all these barriers to healing. They're maybe not really that sick, and this wound isn't healing.
Wow.
And you come to find out that they have some intriguing type of lifestyle behaviors that perpetuate the wound.
Yeah.
And so we are diving into these things and whatever their past traumas are that relate to them. I mean, the anxiety that's involved with having things and picking at them, and you know, or we just explore some of their environmental barriers. It's maybe not even a health barrier, but
Sure.
just the way that they live.
Yep.
That causes or perpetuates wounds. And so I'm a bit of a MacGyver with Sherlock Holmes, and any wound care specialist you talk to, they'll agree with me that we're not just, and this is the saying, we're not just managing the hole in the patient, but the whole patient.
The whole patient. I can see that. I can see that a lot. So, all right. So we looked at some of the rewarding parts of that, and you know, how about what's the thing you least enjoy about your profession?
Wow.
There's got to be something. Come on, Traci. There's got to be something.
I don't know if I want to say this, but there really isn't that many things that are negative that detract from it. I think I've just been really blessed and lucky to find this environment to work in.
You have.
I would say that if you talk to somebody that was in a fee-for-service world, they'd probably have a laundry list of medical business issues that go into the boutique nature of billing for wound care. And so those are struggles that I have luckily you know, avoided with the way that our business model works in the Paso organization. Okay. I don't take call. That's a perk.
Okay.
But being kind of growing up in a surgical world, it's really hard to not want to be in the know. And you know, and certainly my colleagues know that I am readily available. Now I do shut my phone off after a certain time in the evenings, and I make people know when I'm actually not available. But for the most part, in terms of negative,
well, it doesn't have to be negative. It's just the things you just don't enjoy.
I guess it'd be dissatisfying. There's some dissatisfying things about wound management when you have to render bad news.
Sure.
You know, we've done everything we could, or everything we could isn't even going to help you.
Right.
So, so I kind of say that there's this spectrum. There's a spectrum of heroism in medicine, and there's the hero who will do everything to save a life.
Yep.
And then there's the hero who will will reduce the amount of care to preserve the dignity of the patient and not flog them with the kitchen sink.
Right.
So that there is a release factor. And I kind of sit more on the spectrum closer to that, because I have a lot of patients that are end of life. And I realize that, you know, there is a point when care will be futile.
Right.
And so your pediatricians, your pediatric surgeons, you know, your cardiothoracic surgeons will be those heroes that will give everything that they can to save that patient's life. Where I do spend a lot more time on the spectrum, where I am saying, you know, here are the options. I'm not going to tell you about this option because I realize it's really not going to benefit you. It's really just going to cause harm.
Right.
And I think personally, because I was in that other side of the spectrum growing up in surgery, you know, where to cut is secure, at times have sort of step back and have that little bit of guilt that I cannot be the answer and have the magic, the magic wand.
Yeah, you're not the hero. You're not the hero.
Right. I can't be that kind of hero. So
now, along the way, I know, looking through your profile and stuff, your professional profile, you're doing some other things outside of obviously your practice. Tell us a little bit about your Wish organization and all that good stuff.
Right. So I have a very fond affection to the Wizard of Oz.
Okay.
And I think I was sometime late night, post-divorce, trying to figure out the meaning of life, and in a low point, when you're almost wondering where you're headed and why things aren't going how you visioned, because I'm a luminary thinker. I kind of see the masterpiece before I even open the can of paint.
Right.
I was sitting there and something washed over me, and I said, okay, what is this word wish came into my head. And I'd already been given the alias Wound Wizard, and the whole Wizard of Oz thing. And actually, you and I did business with regards to this whole idea of
Yep.
Wizard of Oz and the Temple of Oz, or the City of Oz.
Setting up some sites and getting you going on that. Yeah.
And created my business logo when I was in private practice. And this word wish came into my head, and I, I started thinking of, what am I going to call my business, my private practice? And so it was Wound Care Initiatives and Specialty Health, WISH. And then Wish, the Wish Clinic.
Right.
And then Working in Synergy for Humanity was this overreaching group that I have tagged or have created in Facebook, which is just essentially bringing people together in a very public forum to build with positivity and growth and enlightenment.
Okay.
And that's the Working in Synergy for Humanity group and organization.
So where can people find more about that?
So they can go to my Wish Facebook group. It's working in. They can type in working in Synergy for Humanity. So I was about to give you my Wish practice logo again.
Yeah.
But Working in Synergy for Humanity.
And that's on Facebook then, right?
And that's a Facebook. Yeah, that's a Facebook
fantastic.
Group.
Well, I'm going to bring you back on because I want to deep dive into that group and the topics around that, because you're such a fascinating guest, because you go to a level in depth it's pretty amazing. The vernacular and the vocabulary is amazing, and you've done a great job. So, but I'm afraid that if we start this now, it might be hours and hours and hours, but I really want to talk about that initiative. So I'm going to bring you back for that. So it's been an amazing ride for you. What's next?
Man, getting my kids to college.
Okay. As a parent of 5, I understand that concept 100%, right?
I take every day as it comes. I think if today was my last day and took my last breath, I think I would really be a happy person. I really feel fulfilled. I think I've really, I guess I should really be honest and say, well, we are growing. Our business is growing. My practice is growing. I've been asked to grow beyond the walls of our state of Colorado, which is our largest region. And so we're going to scale our program that I started 4 years ago, in the PACE program, to other regions where we practice out in California, New Mexico, Virginia, Pennsylvania. And so that's the big thing. I am getting my MBA.
Good.
And so that is to help teach me how to talk to the business side of medicine, and hopefully eventually become not lay down my clinical hat and become more an administrative hat, and sort of follow in the footsteps of my mom and my stepdad.
All right, so I've got the $1 million question for you. I ask this of just about everybody. It's just something I picked up recently. We all have this concept in modern day life of a bucket list, you know, the things we want to do, right? And that's pretty easy. They're near and dear to our heart. But what's the opposite? Do you have, and that's a rotten term, but do you have one of the, it starts with an F and rhymes with a bucket. Do you have something you just never want to do?
I
Dead air.
never want to go swimming in the Arctic.
Okay. That is the most unique question answer I've heard so far. That's awesome. So next, see, I'll tell you what's going to happen for you, Traci. The next time you hear somebody talk about a bucket list, you're going to think about this conversation because I've asked you what's the opposite. Well, fantastic. We're going to call it a stop here today because I do want to deep dive on the things that you're working with outside your practice and your initiative. You've been an amazing guest. It's always good to hear stories about this. And, you know, a high performance person like you and that does all these things and is running 100 miles an hour, it's inspiring for a lot of people. So I appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you, Rex.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I said it was such a pleasure to be a guest for you. Thank you.
Fantastic. So we're going to call this one a wrap for today. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Look for another episode coming up soon from Dr. Traci Kimball. We're excited to have her here and to understand what she's working on next. And so that we're going to call it for today. This is Rex Andrew from the Rex Andrew Show. You can find us anywhere on podcasting and always at the website rexandrewshow.com. And I just have one last thing to say to everybody. Be bold, be brave, be safe, and make it a great day.